Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra talking about efforts the administration is taking after the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. Becerra says HHS will take steps to increase access to medication abortion, ensure patient privacy and non-discrimination for patients as well as providers, examine the department's authority to ensure that clinical judgment of doctors and hospitals is supported in treating pregnant patients, and working to ensure that all providers from doctors to pharmacists to clinics have appropriate training and resources to handle family planning needs, and then to take every legal available step to protect family planning care, including emergency contraception and contraception like IUDs. For more on this, I want to bring in ABC News senior policy reporter Ann Flaherty, White House correspondent Mary Alice Parks, who's traveling with the president overseas, and Dr. Xavier Vicencio, physician leader for American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. And I want to start with you. How much of what we just heard from Secretary Becerra is new, and how much of this was just him really reiterating existing policy?
Well, Diane, absolutely nothing that he talked about today changes the ballgame in this. This is actually status quo. What he did is he went over every existing right. He talked about that under the ACA, insurers have to provide contraceptives. He talked about medication abortion being available, but acknowledging that it's not a loophole. Telehealth is not a loophole. You can only get access to this medication abortion if it's allowed under your state laws. Clinicians cannot prescribe it across state lines. He spoke very carefully. He mentioned that his legal counsel was sitting up front. I thought that was very interesting. Our Mary Bruce tried to press him on this. He had hinted before that there were some options that he was going to consider, such as paying for transportation for women to get out of their states. But when she pressed him on it, he said, you know, we want to be very careful. We are not going to go rogue here. We are going to adhere to the law. He made that very careful, and he said clear, and he said, there is no silver bullet on this. Every option is on the table. Stay tuned.
Dr. Vicencio, how helpful do you think it is for patients and providers to hear what the Secretary had to say, and what more would you like to hear?
Thank you for having us on. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, who I represent today, and I'm a leader of, represents over 60,000 OBGYNs in this country who take care of the people who are going to need the care that Secretary Becerra was talking about. We're grateful that he and the administration are speaking about reinforcing the rights that patients and providers and physicians still have. He also is acknowledging and I think reflecting the absolute confusion that is happening right now. While we expected and thought that this ruling might come down, we also knew and expected that this would cause abject chaos across the country with a patchwork of laws and policies in which doctors, other healthcare providers, as well as patients aren't able to understand and wade through. And he's also reflecting the liminal spaces that oftentimes are reflected in pregnancy care, and acknowledging that abortion care is a part of the spectrum of pregnancy care. I am hopeful to hear more from Secretary Becerra and the administration, particularly around guidance. He mentioned EMTALA, and that's one thing that we've been talking a lot about and concerned about in terms of emergency situations and making sure that people can stay safe and in situations which are life-threatening, but maybe are not as straightforward as the non-experts that are writing these laws would like to think that they are, as well as guidance for privacy for patients as well as physicians. And so we are certainly looking forward to working with Secretary Becerra and HHS, as well as supporting all of the evidence-based and science-based rights that patients and providers hopefully still have.
Mary Alice, President Biden has been under a lot of pressure from Democrats to do more in response to the Supreme Court ruling and the trigger laws in place now in several states. Is this what they were looking for?
Absolutely not, Diane. And the president has been quiet on this since Friday. He's been here focused on his international agenda and facing so many questions from members of his own party back home to do more. I can't imagine that activists, fellow Democrats, were very happy with what they heard from Secretary Becerra today. Look, they've been asking for bold action. You know, I was talking to Senator Murray's office this last weekend. She is the chair of the Help Committee in the Senate. She's not exactly some huge progressive. She works closely with the administration, a pretty moderate and thoughtful Democrat that's working closely with the administration on all of this. And even she was willing to express just deep frustration, saying that the administration should have had plans and executive actions ready on day one, and telling me that really thought that the president administration needed to push the envelope here, take risks, see what the federal government could do to try to increase access to abortion care. That's not the kind of language that we got from Secretary Becerra. Just like Ann was saying, this was a cautious secretary up there, very prudent, being very careful with his words, and really going out of his way to say that he wasn't sure yet what they would be able to do. He didn't say whether they'd be able to make the abortion pill available in pharmacies and where the FDA would land on that. He didn't say whether they'd be able to use funds to help people travel across state lines. I imagine there's going to be a lot of activists frustrated after this press conference.
And Dr. Vicencio, one of the things that we heard this secretary drill down on was saying that he wants to make sure that people are informed. It sounded like he was talking about providers, that abortion care can be appropriate to stabilize patients. Who do you think that was geared at? Providers? Do you think that was geared at lawmakers? And can you just expand on that a little bit, and the kinds of cases where an abortion is necessary to stabilize a patient?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, pregnancy care, and particularly care in pregnancy complications and emergency situations, is not always straightforward. We've been talking a lot over the last couple of days about exceptions, particularly for the life of the mother or the pregnant patient. The problem is that doesn't really fit into the reality of medical science and the way that we practice. Oftentimes, someone may be actively miscarrying, but still has cardiac activity or still has a live fetus. And the appropriate and best treatment for that patient is to evacuate the uterus, or in that case, in some places, that would be considered an abortion. However, that is treatment for a life-threatening condition. And so what I think that he was talking about was both to physicians, providers, as well as lawmakers, that HHS, as well as the administration, is acknowledging that this is complex, that the science is complex, and that truly all of these decisions should be made within the context of the patient-physician relationship, and that patients ultimately need to have the broad and full spectrum of care, and it shouldn't be limited by an ideological belief about when life begins or when life ends, or what is and isn't an abortion, particularly when it's described by lawmakers who are not experts. I've spent decades of my life training to become an expert, to take care of pregnant people as well as other conditions. I deliver babies as well as provide abortion care. I understand that these situations are extraordinarily complex, as do my patients. And I am frankly confused by some of these laws, and what it's forcing me to do as a physician, and my colleagues in some states that are extremely restrictive, is decide whether or not I'm willing to risk the penalties of these laws, risk civil, professional, sometimes even criminal penalties to care for patients in emergent situations.
So can I ask you, wouldn't the situation that you just described, wouldn't that fall under the exception to protect the life of the patient?
So it depends on who's interpreting that. And if it's someone who's not a medical expert, there's not a bright line that says, okay, you are officially dying. It is a spectrum. And what we do in medicine is try to keep someone as far away from the point of almost dying as possible. And so we treat with the best evidence and with counseling and with patient input as early as we possibly can. What these exceptions and these laws are forcing us to do in these very specific but not uncommon emergency situations is wait longer than we normally would. People get sicker than they normally would because we need to make sure that we are, or at least trying to make sure that we are following the law. It's an interference in the way that we practice medicine, and is frankly cruel.
So, Ann, what else does the White House have in their toolbox here? What else can be coming?
Well, we've certainly heard from Democrats, progressives who say they want to see the government lease federal lands to abortion clinics. The White House has thrown that out. They say that it wouldn't keep people safe. People could possibly be prosecuted as soon as they walk off those federal lands in states. They have knocked that down. I do think what they have hinted at are two things. Becerra suggested this today, that he might be, the FDA might loosen those restrictions on mifepristone. We know that we can't get it from pharmacies. That could change. The other thing that he hinted at is Medicaid. Right now, there is an exception for rape and incest. And in states like Arkansas, there is not. So he sort of hinted at this idea that he was going to go after these state laws and make sure that they are allowing women who take Medicaid to have abortion in those rare circumstances. Again, that's not going to impact many women. This is not a silver bullet. So I think we do need to stay tuned and to continue to work with the health department to see what they've got planned.
And how carefully does President Biden and the Democrats in general, do you think they have to tread carefully here at all lest they set a precedent for what might happen when Republicans are in power and they don't like a Supreme Court ruling?
Well, absolutely. I think that's why you're seeing such caution with such ideas like getting rid of the filibuster or expanding the court. I don't think that Biden wants to do anything that would then come back and hurt Democrats years down the road. But I think that there are things that they can do. I think that they're being very, very careful because, if Secretary Becerra starts talking, those things can be used against them in court when this will get litigated. Everybody I've talked to has said this is just going to be a legal fight for years. We know that this is going to end up in the courts. So this is really just the beginning of this fight on both sides rather than the end.
All right. Ann Flaherty, Mary Alice Parks, Dr. Genevieve Vicencio, we appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.